Remember, it ain't who you know, it's who knows you.
Sure, bad coffee.
Makes the race. We've all heard it and it's true. But what does it mean? More importantly, how can it help you to be a sharper player? Pace points. That's how. When dealing with pace in horse racing, you have to understand it affects races at every level, class, and distance. Not always how we think it will, but the impact is still there just the same. Knowing who is likely to be running fastest at the start and who is likely to be finishing fastest nearing the finish, that last quarter mile is the most valuable wagering asset. Pace Points does this extremely accurately, utilizing fractional times of individual horses, post position, track condition, ground loss, and other intangibles like rider tendencies. Pace Points lets you know at a glance two key factors: who is likely to be fastest early and who is likely to be fastest late. We've all seen races where it looks like there's a ton of speed, and then one horse clears the field, often going wire to wire. How about the turf races that look like there is no speed? Somebody is going to set that pace. We know they will. We've seen it before. Have you ever had one of those head scratches where the pace is slow, even dawdling, and here comes a closer running past them all late? Pace Points will help you navigate these pace scenarios and more. The races that show you one horse with 1-1-1 front-running running lines and a horse with 3-3-3 stalking running lines throughout the fractions of the race, and the horse with the threes that looks like the stalker is on the lead. Pace Points will help you sharpen your game, recognize these things in advance, and recognize great setups. Pace does make the race, and Pace Points will help you understand the dynamics of the pace and the race. If you watch Past the Wire TV and read Past the Wire, you have heard me say the numbers don't lie. They don't. That is why Pace Points starts with the individual fractions of each horse and goes from there, where the best eyes, angles, and experience in the game factors in post, trip, ground loss, jockey, and more. An invaluable tool for any arsenal. We'll put this crucial info at your fingertips in an easy to read, recognize, and more importantly, utilize fashion. I like to say simplicity is the essence of intelligence. And although Pace Points is on a pretty high level, we made it very easy to understand and easier to utilize. You're going to see a list of the horses in each race. 2 columns next to the horses. The first column is going to give you a number. The lower the number, the faster the horse is early. And by early, we mean primarily the first quarter of any given race. Second column is going to give you a number. The lower that number, the faster the horse is late, nearing the finish, and primarily the last quarter mile of any given race. So you'll be looking at a list of the horses in the race, 2 numbers, an early number and a late number, based on all the factors we discussed before. Pace Points, easy to use, easy to understand, and the longer you use it, the better grasp you will have on pace, making the race, and how it's going to affect the outcome.
To learn more about Pace Points or to try it out, visit pastthewire.com or watch Past the Wire TV. We think you'll be glad you did.
Are they talking about us? Shh, wait. Are they talking about us? I think I heard Past the Wire. Past the Wire TV. They are talking about us. Often imitated, never duplicated. We are everywhere.
Seriously? If you're betting horses and not watching these shows, you gotta be freaking crazy. Capiche?
You're watching Past the Wire TV.
knowledge. It isn't free. You got to pay attention.
And ladies and gentlemen, we direct your attention to the winner's circle for a very special presentation. Representatives from Handicapping for Horses, along with professional handicapper Jonathan Stetton, are proud to support the work of the Thoroughbred Aftercare Alliance and Old Friends. Accepting the check for the inaugural Handicapping for Horses event this past summer at Saratoga are representatives from the Thoroughbred Aftercare Alliance and Old Friends. Gulfstream Park welcomes Michael Blowen, Jonathan Stetton, Kelly Stovey, Jim Rhodes here this afternoon. Since 2012, the TAA has awarded more than $17.2 million to accredited organizations. Handicapping for Horses looks to make their Saratoga Springs event larger and raise money for Thoroughbreds Aftercare year after year. Once again, thank you to Handicapping for Horses, Jonathan Stetton, and welcome to Old Friends and our friends at the TAA. The Rainbow Six and race number 5 up next.
And they're off in the Kentucky Derby.
You're watching Past the Wire TV, the biggest races at the best tracks. From the Kentucky Derby to the Breeders' Cup. The best horse racing coverage is right here on Past the Wire TV.
Dynasty in motion, reshaping the sport's greatest tradition, channeling the legends of his line and surpassing them. 4 of the last 6 Derby winners carry his genes. A Golden Son, a Horse of the Year. Another chapter written beneath those iconic spires. Derby dreams fulfilled for the titans of our industry. From authentic to sovereignty, a legacy both real and supreme. Into mischief.
Everybody, Dan Oman here with some exciting news. DRF Formulator, the gold standard in past performance information, is now free, exclusively on DRF Bets. Join DRF Bets with the promo code WINNING, get a $250 first deposit match bonus, a $10 free bet, and free Formulator already uploaded to your account. Access Formulator's premium features, including sortable trainer stats, race replays, personalized trip notes, and lots more. Free Formulator, exclusively on DRF Bets.
Often imitated, never duplicated.
Ciao tutti. Welcome to Past the Wire TV. Thank you all for tuning in. And if you're here, remember, we ain't playing for the cheap seats, so you're in the right spot. Going to take an early look at the Breeders' Cup Classic. It looks like a great, great race. We're going to look at the Thorograph numbers. I picked out some horses which I think are likely heading to the Breeders' Cup Classic. Hopefully, we're right. I'm sure there are going to be some in there that are not on our list, and there might be some on our list that are not there. That just goes with the territory, but it will still make for what I think could be an interesting show and discussion, and get a little bit ahead of the curve on the Breeders' Cup. Again, the Classic this year looks like it's going to be one hell of a horse race. The 3-year-old championship, there's a good chance will be on the line. Yes, it's Sovereignty's to lose right now, hands down. But if journalism beats older horses in the Pacific Classic and then turns the tables on Sovereignty in the Breeders' Cup Classic, I think then it becomes a legitimate discussion. A lot of ifs. We'll see. Again, Sovereignty's to lose, and Sovereignty has a chance to win the Breeders' Cup Classic, run the table, and probably be horse of the year. So it's really interesting, and the 3-year-old rivalry between those two, and journalism is going to have to beat him at some point to make it a real rivalry. But it's nice to see. It reminds me, I've seen a lot of great 3-year-old rivalries in my day. Affirmed and Ali Daw, Sunday Silence, and Easy Goa. Just we could go on all day. So it's nice to see that again. It'd be nice to see them both here next year, but we ain't going to see that. So be that as it may. But they're both going to have to beat older horses. So we'll see how they fare. We'll get a window into journalism first, because he's going to try it in the Pacific Classic, which is this coming Saturday. And should he win or run well or very well, he's going to have that home track and race over the track advantage heading into the Classic. How much that's going to mean remains to be seen. We'll see how that plays out. But it certainly makes for an interesting Classic. And by no means is it a 2-horse race, because we've got the older horses to look at. So we're going to look at the Thorograph numbers now. Torpedo Anna, who's on my list, and Sovereignty, who's on my list, they both ran Saturday, Travis Day. Both win. I don't have the numbers for those races, and I did that deliberately because when we get to those horses, we'll cover that and project that. But I did that deliberately. So I could have waited and got those numbers and did it then, but I wanted to do it before I had those numbers, and we'll cover that when I get to those horses. But again. Great Breeders' Cup Classic looming at Del Mar, mile and a quarter. Just about, about 2 months away, just a little over 2 months, maybe, whatever it is. But I'm looking forward to it, and I'm hoping, all the horses that are on this list and maybe some others show up and make it and are in the gate. So we'll see. But let's look at Sovereignty first. We'll start there. And let me just say, if you're not watching our Thorograph shows, you got to be crazy. No question. This week, the race of the week was the Ballerina. Hope Road. Nailed her. Saw her coming to a monster race based on my reading the numbers and patterns, and that's exactly what happened. We've beaten so many favorites. I think we're 8 out of 10 spot on. One head scratcher, that was the Del Mar Oaks, and one misread by me, and that was the horse that won the Sword Dancer, the other Godolphin horse. But other than that, and that one I immediately identified what I did wrong, and that was underestimating the improvement he would show coming to the U.S. and running on a firm, different type of turf course than what he had faced. But that's all behind us. We got to go forward. But we're 8 for 10 spot on. Where you going to see a record like that? You got to watch these Thorograph shows, and you can get the sheets for free if you watch them and pay attention. So who wouldn't do that? I don't know. Sovereignty. We know he's a monster. He just keeps telling us over and over and over every time he gets on the racetrack. As a 2-year-old, he showed ability, 9.5, 5 3/4. That's a nice pattern and nice numbers, respectable progression for a 2-year-old. But he really turned into a monster at 3. 1 3/4, 1 3/4, 0 0. Then in the Jim Dandy, he went really forward big time and ran that 2.5 negative. And that was the number I thought he was going to regress off. And maybe regress and win, but maybe regress and not win. I'm not sure he regressed at all. He may have gone forward again, which is going to leave us with the question at the Breeders' Cup. And I do have a feeling that he went forward. Or if he did regress, it's not by much. But I got a feeling he may have gone forward again. Now we come to and they're gonna run him straight in the Breeders' Cup off this, so he's going to have time off. But with Belmonte, that makes no difference whatsoever. He's one of the few handful of guys that could run fresh off a layoff 6 months, a year, 8 months, 2 months, 3 months. Don't mean nothing. Those horses are going to be as ready as they could be. So I'm not so worried about the layoff, but I think what we're going to have to ask ourselves when that comes, and we'll dissect this at the right time, and it's going to need dissecting, especially considering he's going to be a short price in the Breeders' Cup Classic, and a lot of people are going to be, hanging on to that bandwagon. Is he going to regress off this new, possibly monster top number? I always look for those regressions and bounces and, tail offs off those big numbers. So now we're going to have a horse probably off a new top, probably off a significant top, catching older horses across the country, fresh in a new situation, in a new environment. Will he bounce? I don't know. We'll address it at the time, but it looks like Sovereignty is going to be heading into the Breeders' Cup Classic as one of the favorites, and with a monster potential type of resume and a monster potential type of Thorograph pattern. If he went faster than the 2.5 negative, wow. Let's see what he got in the Travers, and then at the time we'll kind of try and project what he's going to run in the Breeders' Cup Classic. Now, Journalism, the other 3-year-old, also great pattern. Not quite as fast, but phenomenal pattern. 10.5, 7 3/4, 4.5 as a 2-year-old. Comes back as a 3-year-old, and he's another one that just went right to the lookout. I'm a serious player category. 0.5 negative. Regresses or tails off that a little bit. 1.5 negative. I'm sorry, 1.5. 1.5. 1 3/4. Goes back to the 0.5 negative. At Monmouth in the Haskell, 0 3/4 negative. Now we're going to see him in the Breeders' Cup Classic. In the Pacific Classic. Looks like he's going forward still. He's got to stay on par with Sovereignty. But a 2.5 negative looks like it's definitely in his wheelhouse and in the cards. If he can bring the same kind of race and same kind of courage and gameness and everything else against older horses, which, there's nothing that indicates to me that he might not. So, interesting. Again, he's playing catch up. He's playing catch up on the numbers. He's playing catch up on the resume as far as 3-year-old championship. He's playing catch up on the wins because Sovereignty's beat him every time they faced each other, which I believe is only twice. But he's 2-0 against 0 for 2. So Sovereignty's got the edge on him. We know that. But one thing I've said, and you could say I'm crazy, and you could say, well, you like Journalism early on, so you're a little bit biased. I'm not. That's all bullshit. Don't pay no mind to that. Here's what I truly think based on my own observations, and I've been watching this game a long time. I would love to see, and I have a feeling we may see it come Breeders' Cup Classic. Wink, wink. But what I would love to see is Journalism put the target on Sovereignty and let Sovereignty go first, and Journalism make him the target. Because I believe, and I've always believed, that Journalism is a better racehorse with a target. And the 2 times that he raced Sovereignty, he was the target for Sovereignty. I'd like to see that change. Will it change the outcome? That remains to be seen. And hopefully we will get a chance to see it. But these two are very talented 3-year-olds, very intriguing 3-year-olds, and both look like they have the speed and ability and class to handle the move into the older horses. So we'll see what happens. But again, Journalism on the numbers alone and the resume is playing a little bit catch up with Sovereignty. But both do look like they're continuing to go forward. Torpedo Anna needs no introduction. They call her a grizzly bear. We know why. Not a popular opinion. I get it. I think she, as good as she is, and she's very, very, very good, and I'm taking nothing away from her, but I call it the way that I see it. I think she is slightly overrated by the masses. But she's very, very, very good, and she's tough. And the race she ran into Travis against boys was honorable. But she has gotten some soft trips, and she has had some clunkers, and she has had to work a little bit harder in fields that we didn't think she'd have to work that hard throughout her career. So I just think she's a smidget overrated, and there's nothing wrong with thinking that, and there's nothing wrong with you disagreeing with that and thinking she's the greatest thing since sliced bread. But I call it the way I see it. You call it the way you see it, and that's what makes a horse race. And there's nothing wrong with that. But let's look at her numbers. At 2, 8.5, 4 3/4, 9. So she went forward, she regressed. Makes sense. Comes back, equals the number at 3, 4 3/4, 1 1/4, 1, 1 3/4, 1 1/2, 2 1/4, 2. The end of the 3-year-old season. Say what you want. She got a little slower than she was in the middle of the 3-year-old season. A little tired, a little worn out, a little worse for wear. Who knows? Comes back, hasn't gotten any faster, maintains when she's right. She runs a 2, a 1 1/2. She flops 8.5, comes back 1 1/2. And then, wins at Saratoga. What number did she get then? I don't know. I tend to think she run around the same number. She was inside of Darth Vader. Probably got a more ground-saving trip than Darth Vader. I haven't watched that replay yet. I like to watch replays, after the fact, and I'm a little behind on the Travers Day ones to take my notes. But I tend to think she ran a 1, maybe a 0. I don't know, that the numbers tend to be fast and a little exaggerated on those days. Maybe a 0 negative. I don't think so, but maybe I could be wrong. But probably a 0 or a 1, which puts her right there with the other 2 that we covered so far, but certainly not faster than them. And I think you're going to need to run faster than a 1 to win the Breeders' Cup Classic. So she has yet to do that with all the accolades and all the great racing that she's done. If she winds up in the Classic, I personally would run her in the distaff. But if she winds up in the Classic, she's going to have to run faster than she ever has in order to win it. Sierra Leone, he'd already won it. Is he going to win it again? I don't know. Let's see. 9, 4 3/4 as a 2-year-old. Big jump forward, didn't get a chance to regress because didn't run again after that big jump forward. As a 3-year-old, goes a little bit forward, 4 1/2, 1 1/2, 1 1/2, 1 1/4, 1, 0 3/4. Belmonte, monster race in the Breeders' Cup Classic, 4 negative. Wow. Granted, great pace setup. They went very fast early, but that's fast by any stretch of the imagination. That's faster than anybody in here yet that we've gotten to has run. And he was entitled to tail off that number, and he was expected to, I would even say. 4-year-old comes back, runs a 0 3/4 in a race I would call a flop. Comes off that, runs a 1 1/4 negative. Saratoga, Whitney, 3 negative. He is better than he's ever been, even though he ran faster in the Breeders' Cup Classic than he has this year. Those 2 negative numbers back to back, 2 points apart, just really shows a world-class racehorse in peak form, really coming to his own as a 4-year-old. I don't know if they're going to run him again before the Breeders' Cup, but based on everything you're seeing right here and everything that I'm seeing right here, he's going to be a force, and the 3-year-olds are going to have to go forward and be at their best and be able to handle all the horses to be able to hold this guy off down the lane. And if he gets that, kind of pace set up again, he's going to be a handful. Mind frame. Funny thing about mind frame, when mind frame beat Sierra Leone at Churchill Downs. I watched that race and I said, you know what? Mindframe ain't going to beat him again. He just had the jump, the perfect trip, the setup, everything going his way. And I said, you know what? Level playing field, square race. He is not going to beat him again. But Mindframe is a super talented horse, and he does get, those perfect trips because he's a catbird seat horse. And those horses are, are always tough to handle. So let's look at Mindframe. We got nothing at 2, but at 3, he come out running. 0 3/4, 4, made sense. 0 3/4 off the 4, and then repeats to 0 3/4. So that first big effort took a little bit out of him. He regressed, makes sense. But then he kind of showed who he is and paired up those zeros. And, he's done nothing but that since. Comes back as a 4-year-old, 0 3/4, 0 3/4. And then at Churchill Downs, it goes at 0.5 negative. So a little bit of gradual forward movement and maintenance. He's actually got a phenomenal pattern and the kind of pattern that I've seen jump forward significantly. This is the kind of pattern that I could see a horse like this jumping forward to a 4 negative, a 5 negative, like nothing, what puts him right there with Sierra Leone. So I might eat those never beat him again words, but it looks like it puts him right there with Sierra Leone. He does have a tendency and a running style to get a better trip than Sierra Leone and a jump on those 3-year-olds that have a little bit to do in order to get as fast as I think he is going to get for the Breeders' Cup Classic. So Mindframe, intriguing, dangerous horse, and a catbird seat horse. Fierceness. Fierceness is a surprise entrant in the Pacific Classic if he winds up there, and it looks like he will. And Fierceness, we kind of know what he is. He's brilliant when he's brilliant, and he's not so brilliant when he's not. A lot of different theories about, why sometimes he throws in clunkers. He doesn't like to fight. He doesn't like a horse on his outside. Doesn't like a horse on his inside. I've heard all different theories about that. I just think, based on my eye test and closely watching more than once every race he's ever run, I think he likes it when things go his way. And his way doesn't necessarily mean alone on the lead or nobody to dig in against. But I tend to think that, yes, he runs better when there's nobody outside digging in at him. And he's on the outside. And I tend to think he runs better when he doesn't hit any adversity or any bumps in the road during the running of the race. And there's a couple of races we could point out and isolate that would kind of signal that. But again, when things go right, and they could very well in the Breeders' Cup Classic, he's a fast SOB and always was. 3.5 first time out at 2, 12, 1.5 negative number when he surprised everybody in the Breeders' Cup off the dud race at Belmonte. But he gets a 1.5 as a 2-year, a 1.5 negative as a 2-year-old winning the Breeders' Cup. Comes back 4.5, 3.25 negative, big jump forward. Flops in the Derby, 12 3/4. Lays up Saratoga, 1 negative, 1.5 negative. Del Mar, 1.5 negative. Fast at 3. At 4. Churchill Downs, 3.25 negative. Regresses off that one, 0.5, and then comes back with a 1 negative. Again, a lot of talent. Not a lot of consistency. But the funny thing is, he's fast even when he's not consistent most of the time. His duds have gotten, much less frequent than they were earlier in his career. So now he's very, very fast or fast. So he's going to be a little bit of an enigma and a little bit of a horse that you really have to decipher what's his trip going to be all about? How's the pace? How's the trip? How's the positioning of the riders? Where's he going to have to fight? Where's he going to have to dig in? And I think that's going to dictate a lot towards how he runs, as much as his numbers and patterns and patterns. His fastest races are absolutely contentious here, no question about it. But again, I think he needs things to go his way in order to get that. Now, certainly not least but last on this list, and I apologize for not having more on this list, but I didn't want to cover a whole bunch of horses that ain't going to be in the race, and we don't know who's going to be in the race. So Nisos, who also runs in the Pacific Classic. Now, Nisos is a horse that's had some issues, so obviously his races have been spaced apart. Ran at 2, didn't run it all at 3, come back at 4, but there was a distance question with him. I think he answered it in the San Diego. And the way he won that race, for me, and I get it, you don't know until they do it, but I saw a horse that would get 1.25 miles. But here's the intriguing thing about Nisos. And there's only a handful of horses, like Wise Dan comes to mind. When Wise Dan was heading to the Breeders' Cup, he could have run in the Breeders' Cup Sprint, the Breeders' Cup Mile, the Breeders' Cup Turf Mile, the Breeders' Cup Turf, the Breeders' Cup Classic. You got 5 races that horse would have been a contender in. I mean, holy shit, how often do you see that? Look at Nisos. Let's say Nisos comes up a little short at 1.25 miles. He'd be a contender, one of the favorites in the Breeders' Cup Mile, and he'd be a contender, one of the favorites in the Breeders' Cup Sprint. There's 3 races right there that Nisos would be a major player in and take his share of support at the windows. You don't say that about a lot of horses. So it takes a special horse to be that much of a player in any one of those kind of races. So Nisos, hats off to him. But we're looking at him now for the Classic, not for any of those other races, even though there's a chance he might wind up in one of them. As a 2-year-old, he was fast right away. 3.5, 1. Goes on the shelf, unfortunately, as a 3-year-old, no starts. But comes back at 4, and he didn't miss a beat. Comes back, runs a 1, then goes to a 0.5 negative, tails off that a little bit and runs a 1.25 in the San Diego. But there's a caveat to that, all right? He had a lot of trouble in that race. He was on the inside, so he saved ground, and that's an important factor with these Thorograph numbers. So he did save a lot of ground, but he had a lot of traffic, lost momentum, and, caught some dirt in the face, tipped out and win. So I upgrade that race a little bit off the 1.25, but he's got a 1, 0.5 negative, 1.25. Another one that looks like he's going forward, and definitely he's already run, a 0.5 negative number. So he's only got to go 2-3 points, forward to be in that, 2-3 negative range, which from everything I'm seeing is what it's going to take to win the Breeders' Cup Classic in 2025. I'm saying if you can't run a 2 negative, you ain't going to get the trophy. I'm looking at that or better or faster to win the Breeders' Cup Classic this year, barring some ridiculous track at Del Mar or something like that. But that's kind of what it's looking like to me. So there we have it. And again, we're going to dissect these more. We just wanted to get an early look at who's going in and, which way they're going. And obviously, these are prime contenders for the Breeders' Cup Classic. They're supposed to all be going forward, and it's supposed to all look like they got great patterns and numbers. So we got Sovereignty, Journalism, Torpedo Anna, Sierra Leone, Mindframe, and Fierceness, who we talked about, and Nisos. And of those, I'd say the most questionable ones on the win end, not that they can't win, but, this is an early look. But I'm willing to say Torpedo Anna is probably one that is not going to be for me, and Fierceness is probably one that's not going to be for me for the reasons we outlined here. No need for me to get repetitive and take up more of your time than you've already offered up. So with that, that's our early look at the Breeders' Cup Classic. Thank you, everybody, for watching the show. If you like it, hit that like button, subscribe. We got over 8,000 subscribers. Love to get to 10,000 by the Breeders' Cup. That would be huge, would make my day. And I would do something really nice for some of you that help us get there. So share us, tell people about us, tell people to sign, subscribe, tag us, let us know. And if you help, we'll help. I'm a big believer in look out for who looks after you, and you know, have your circle, and you know, look out for the people that are in it, and especially when they look out for you too. So with that, enjoy your day. Pacific Classic this weekend, Kentucky Downs, Keeneland, lots coming up. We got lots happening with pace points and other things. So we'll see you all real soon. Hope you enjoyed the show. Again, hit the like button, subscribe, share it, let people know, and get with those Thorograph shows, man, because they're money. You're not watching them, you got to be crazy. Ciao, ciao.
You ain't smooth, you ain't never going to be a smooth operator.
Here comes journalism, here comes sovereignty, and they square off, head into the final front. Sovereignty wins the Derby!
You're watching Past the Wire TV. Hit that like button and subscribe to Past the Wire TV. Nobody does it better.
Are they talking about us? Shh. Wait. Are they talking about us? I think I heard Past the Wire. Past the Wire TV. They are talking about us. Often imitated, never duplicated. We are everywhere. Nobody does it better.